You guys go! I'll deal with this prick.
For someone who we can barely understand, Kenny McCormick has certainly left a huge impression. Not only that, but throughout all the muffled vulgarities and wisdom he shares, he's gained a reputation for being one of the most heroic people in South Park. That said, he has a dark side as well, and today we're exploring both sides of him. I'm Keefe Enosi with Wicked Binge, and these are Kenny McCormick deeds, good to evil. Now, we want Kenny to live long enough to see this list, so let's start with Kenny's good deeds, starting from the bottom and working our way to the most heroic deed. Let's take a look at the time Kenny accompanied Butters to Hawaii. In the episode Going Native, Butters is acting very strangely, beating up Scott Malkinson and berating everyone at his school except for Kenny. When Butters decides to go find his roots in Hawaii, Kenny accompanies him, both to get Butters access to the plane and to keep him company knowing Butters' erratic emotional state. The locals said that Kenny must prove his worth by partaking in a traditional Hawaiian waterfall, causing Kenny to fall down a waterfall. Even after failing his trial, Kenny proves his worth by bringing the Hawaiian locals a supply of ingredients they need to make chi-chis. Kenny's respect for the Hawaiian people and for Butters is quite admirable given how much they put him through. We're putting this at the bottom of the good category, as it could be argued that Kenny is enabling Butters and the Hawaiians' bad behavior to an extent, but as usual, he's doing what he needs to do to help his friend. But Kenny won't just stop at protecting Butters, as he also guards the citizens of South Park under his superhero persona, Mysterion. When Cartman dons his superhero persona, the Coon, for the first time, he's constantly upstaged by a much more efficient kid crime fighter, that being Mysterion. While the Coon does what he does for attention and admiration, which he does not receive, Mysterion is actually proficient at his vigilante occupation. Mysterion stops a lot of criminal activity, such as thwarting Professor Chaos and General Disarray when they threaten to blow up a hospital. Mysterion later reveals himself to be Kenny, feeling that he owes that to his fellow residents.
Wow, a kid from my class was Mysterion.
We're putting this one somewhat low in the good category, as vigilante justice is a complicated issue, even though we know that Kenny is doing it for the right reasons. Kenny's heroic acts do predate Mysterion, as we have to remember the time when he electrocuted himself to restore a hospital's electricity. Many point to Kenny's later deeds as signs of heroism, but if you really think about it, Kenny's been sacrificing his life for others as early as season 2. When Mephisto was shot before revealing the identity of Cartman's father, he's hooked up to life support at Hell's Pass Hospital. Unfortunately, a huge blizzard causes a power outage in the building and everyone must find a way to restore it so that Mephisto, along with the other patients on life support, will be able to live. After splitting up into two groups, Team B, which consists of Kenny and actually just him, and finds a generator which is missing a wire to connect cords. Selflessly, Kenny uses himself as the connecting piece, restoring power to the hospital, but electrocuting himself to death in the process.
Do you think if we hit him with a shovel, he'd shatter? I don't know. Let's find out.
Kenny is aware that he does come back to life at this point, but we can't overlook the copious amount of pain he puts himself through in order to save the lives of those who don't come back. While saving hospital patients is important to him, he's also very protective when it comes to his family. That's why the bronze medal for Kenny's greatest deeds goes to, well, pretty much everything he does for his sister Karen. While Kenny was always known to have an older brother named Kevin, his younger sister Karen was a later addition to South Park's cast. Despite this, Kenny's relationship with Karen has been explored much more thoroughly than Kevin's ever was. Karen and Kenny are shown to be very close, with Kenny protecting her from danger on several occasions.
I will always be here.
Karen considers Kenny's superhero persona Mysterion to be her guardian angel, and Kenny doesn't even take the credit for his actions. When Kenny gets a job at City Walk, he uses all the money he makes from it to buy Karen a doll she wants, which is really one of the sweetest things he's ever done. Kenny's relationship with Karen is much better than Stan's or Kyle's relationships with their siblings, as while Kyle does truly love Ike, Kenny never punted his sister for following him to school. An important distinction to make, I would say. This makes Kenny not only the best friend, but also best brother you could ever ask for in South Park. Kenny also travels through space and time. That's why the silver medal for Kenny's best deeds is going to when he created a time machine to save everyone's future. In the South Park post-COVID specials, which take place 40 years in the future, Kenny's been spending most of his adult life researching coronavirus, looking for both an origin and a cure. Upon finding a USB drive in the ass of Kenny's corpse, Stan, Kyle, and Cartman find out that Kenny was working on a top-secret time travel experiment which he used to travel into the past, which caused him to catch coronavirus and die. He also heavily criticizes Stan, Kyle, and Cartman for allowing the virus to tear them apart.
These three completely ruined everything.
In the Return of COVID follow-up special, Stan, Kyle, and Cartman use Kenny's time machine to travel to the past to help their younger selves preserve their friendship. This results in a better future for everyone, with the exception of Cartman, who ends up as a homeless alcoholic. Oh well. We all have Kenny to thank for giving Stan, Kyle, and Cartman the technology to save the future, showing that while he didn't prevent coronavirus, Kenny certainly made it easier for almost everyone to deal with. The gold medal for Kenny's best deed is going to when he reversed the events of the war in South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. In this film, Kenny dies and is sent to hell, where he has to deal with Saddam Hussein and Satan. While initially torturing Kenny, Satan later confides in him when going through a rough patch in his relationship.
It's Saddam. He doesn't nurture my emotions.
Satan and Saddam do eventually break free on Earth after a war breaks out between Canada and America. They almost enslave humanity, but thanks to Kenny, Satan stands up for himself and kills Saddam. Satan grants Kenny one wish that Kenny uses to reverse the events of the war. This is one of the most noble things ever done by any character in South Park, with Chef reminding Kenny that he will go back to hell. Granted, Kenny knows death for him is never permanent, but regardless, he could have wished for something else selfish, like a lot of money or learning the hidden secrets behind his immortality. However, Kenny would rather save the lives of the people who can't come back to life, which is extremely honorable and more than enough to rank as his most heroic deed. That does it for our good category, but we now get to the dark side. Let's take a look at Kenny's bad and even downright evil deeds. Starting off this category is the time Kenny became a cat pee addict. When the students of South Park find out that they can become extremely high off of cat pee, Kenny tests this out and finds himself in a heavy metal inspired world where he's surrounded by beautiful women and excessive violence. When his friends snap him out of this fantasy, Kenny becomes very angry and punches Cartman in the process. Kenny goes from bad to worse when he collects cats around town and uses their urine to get high, ignoring all of his friends' concern about his new addiction. Kenny does eventually learn from his mistakes, sort of getting high on life to take him to that world instead. Addiction is a serious problem, so we can't get mad at Kenny here like too much, especially since, despite the episode's ending, we never see him getting high like this afterward. Just remember, drugs are bad, okay? Punching Cartman after withdrawal isn't Kenny's worst violent offense, as we would argue that throwing a ninja star at Butters is more reprehensible. When the boys purchase weapons and pretend to be anime characters, they encounter Professor Chaos, who acts as their villain. While play fighting, Kenny throws a shuriken, which lodges itself into Butters' eye. To avoid getting into trouble for playing with weapons, the boys dress Butters up as a dog, him then wandering off and being taken into an animal shelter. We're putting this at the lower end of the bad category, as Kenny didn't have any ill intent with this violent action. He was simply caught up in the moment and forgot to discern reality from fiction. Also, dressing up Butters like a dog to get out of trouble wasn't exactly immoral either, but all the boys were complicit in it, so we can't single Kenny out, really. Definitely not among the smartest nor kindest actions from Kenny, though. As much pain as Butters went through, Kenny has deliberately attempted to do much more violent acts, such as his attempted murder of Cartman. Cartman becomes upset, thinking that he will never achieve his dream of becoming a NASCAR driver, believing he will never be poor and stupid enough to qualify. After he manipulates his way into participating in a race, Cartman crashes his car and kills 11 people, further perpetuating the negative stereotype that NASCAR drivers and fans are unintelligent. This infuriates Kenny to no end, thus leading him to devise a plan to murder Cartman. Kenny tries to smuggle a sniper rifle into one of Cartman's NASCAR races, which is confiscated by security.
You might be able to buy one in the gift shop.
Kenny then switches to plan B and jumps on Cartman's car, hopping on to stop him in the process. Usually attempted murder would be ranked as a much worse offense, but considering Cartman was killing people in the process of becoming a NASCAR driver, it could be argued that Kenny was actually protecting the lives of potential victims. Regardless, this is definitely one instance where we feel that Kenny's idea of vigilante justice went way too far. The future specials do show that Cartman becomes a homeless alcoholic, so maybe he'll be poor and stupid enough to live out his NASCAR dream once again without potentially being killed by Kenny. Was that too mean? I don't know, it's Cartman. As much as he believes in his own version of justice, Kenny has had moments where he became the true villain of the scenario. That's why the Bronze Medal of Evil is going to his stint as Princess Kenny, which was pretty bad. If Mysterion is the persona Kenny uses to represent his most selfless and noble traits, Princess Kenny is where he portrays himself as the most deceitful and mischievous. When the boys divide themselves into two categories to decide if they'll all get Xbox Ones or PlayStation 4s, Kenny joins Cartman's alliance as Lady McCormick. While Cartman initially conspires with Kenny, believing Kyle will betray them, it turns out Kenny was the one to switch sides for no other reason than Cartman wouldn't let him play as a princess.
All hail the princess!
This we won't hold against Princess Kenny too much, but her actions in South Park The Stick of Truth are another story. At the end of the game, the characters have the titular Stick of Truth taken away from them by government agents. Kenny betrays the party and joins the agents to use the stick's powers. Many fans have commented that they felt this was a very out of character action for Kenny, who's usually portrayed as South Park's biggest hero. We would argue that while this is a very out of character action for Kenny to do, this is not at all out of character for Princess Kenny, who has a history of betraying her friends. As we stated previously, Kenny just gets way too caught up up in his roles, and apparently all is forgiven when he joins the group as Mysterion for the events of The Fractured But Whole. As cute as she is, we're kind of dreading the next day Princess Kenny emerges to betray her friends again. The Silver Medal of Evil is awarded to the time Kenny tried to prevent his parents from having another child. In the episode Cartman Joins Nambla, Kenny learns his parents are trying to have another baby and immediately becomes worried, knowing his family's low income and the possibility of the child killing him. While we understand his concerns, Kenny goes way too far with his reaction when he tries several drastic actions to prevent the baby from being born. This starts with hitting Stuart in the crotch with a baseball to prevent his fertility. This doesn't work and Carol gets pregnant, leading Kenny to spike Carol's vodka with birth control pills. Stuart drinks it instead, causing him to vomit and poop excessively. Kenny then takes Carol and Stuart on a really intense theme park ride called the John Denver Experience, not recommended for pregnant women. Even though Carol is fine, the repercussions fall once again on Stuart, who ends up breaking his nose. Kenny's last resort is chasing his mother around with a plunger, with Stuart following them to a hotel where a Nambla meeting is occurring. This causes the Nambla members to mistake Stuart for Butters in the dark and proceed to have their way with him. Poor Stuart goes through a lot here because of Kenny's actions, which weren't even necessary in the first place. At the end of the episode, Kenny dies and is reincarnated into the body of Carol's fetus, which is probably what he should have tried to do in the first place, considering it happens all the time. Stuart would have been grateful, at least. The odd thing is, when Carol and Stuart finally do have another child, that's not Kenny, Kenny becomes a really great older brother to Karen, so he's adapted to the situation well despite his initial apprehension. But we have to give the gold medal of evil to that time Kenny got Sarah Jessica Parker killed. When the four boys write a really disgusting story called The Tale of Scrody McBoogerballs, they include Sarah Jessica Parker as a topic due to finding her really ugly. When their parents find the book, the boys blame it on Butters, leading to everyone heaping praise on him for such a thought-provoking story.
This is one of the best books we've ever read.
In retaliation, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny attempts to get the book banned, Cartman suggesting that they do this by dressing Sarah Jessica Parker up as a moose so that a hunter will shoot her and they can blame the death on Butters' book. Stan and Kyle are against this, but Kenny surprisingly agrees, resulting in Sarah Jessica Parker's demise. Even though it was Cartman's plan, we're calling this the worst of Kenny's deeds, giving his compliance in the indirect killing.